محمد وعلى محمد صلوات
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you have been listening to the English lectures, and again I emphasize the word lectures so that it's separated from majlis. It is a lecture and it is mostly geared toward the younger audiences, for the kids, so they can understand the story of Imam Hussain. I mean, it's for everybody, but mostly it's for Nakash and Uzail and the other kids. This is for them so they can understand and also benefit and learn from the stories of Imam Hussain, as these English lectures are titled Imam Hussain, or Teacher and or Guide. So definitely the whole purpose is to learn from Imam Hussain the lessons that he taught the whole world. Before I begin, I'd just like to mention this. There's a book that, all of you guys know Dr. Hatim, and his daughter has written a book on Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. The book is titled Who is Abbas? And this book is basically a very good guide on the whole life of Hazrat Abbas, to present his esteemed personality along with the practical lessons that every human can take away from his legacy, his life, and how they can serve as a role model for humanity. So you'll find these flyers around. You can, they have a QR code. You can basically order this book. It's very cheap, especially for the kids, so they can, learn from Hazrat Abbas. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today's lecture basically is on the compassion of Imam Hussain. As you have been hearing, we have been talking about the characteristics of Imam Hussain in his different characteristics. So yesterday, Brother Waleed talked about his generosity. Before that, you've been hearing that. Hopefully everybody remembers. But it's a lot of information, but it's for you to understand, the kids to understand, and they can take lesson from it. So basically, when we talk about now the compassion of Imam Hussain, so we have to define what is compassion. What is compassion? What does it mean? Compassion literally means to suffer together. And what does that mean? That means that it is defined as the feeling that arises when you are confronted with another person's suffering and you feel the need to help or relieve that person's suffering. So compassion is basically when you know somebody's suffering and you want to help them to relieve their suffering. So I'll differentiate that between, the first thing we understand is, like, if somebody says they're hurting, we sympathize with them, right? And that's sympathy. Sympathy is the lowest form of, feeling for somebody, right? When you say you sympathize with somebody, so what does that mean? That means, like, if somebody's hurt, you say, oh, I'm sorry for that. Or if somebody tells you, oh, my uncle died, and you say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Especially at our work, when a fellow worker, for example, John at work says, my dad died, and you say, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. you're not really sorry. You just say that because that's how that's what you're supposed to say. Like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Do you feel sorry? Not really. It's just you want to sympathize with them. You don't know. You just want to be nice to them. So it's like the lowest form of saying something without saying something. It's just like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, or maybe you do feel sorry. That's okay. The next form is empathy. Right? The next level of feeling for somebody is empathy. When you feel awareness towards the people's emotion and attempt to understand how they feel. So empathy is when you now try to put yourself in their shoes. When you try to feel their pain, as they say. When you try to feel somebody's pain, that's empathy. That's the next level of sympathy. It's like if John tells you his father died, then you sit with John and you feel sorry for him. You talk about his father. You talk about your father. Now it's like a whole 15-minute thing where you're both talking about your deceased fathers, and maybe one of you is tearing up. That's empathy. You spent 15 minutes talking about his father that died. That's empathy, right? Now you connected with him, his loss. You didn't just say, oh, sorry to hear that, bye, I'll see you later. All right? You felt his pain. That's empathy. So now what is compassion? Compassion is the result of empathy and sympathy put together. Compassion is the emotional response to sympathy plus empathy, where you have the desire to help somebody. Your compassion is when you not just hear the problem, but you now want to solve the problem. If you know that, let's say for example, I have a problem. What's my problem? I went outside after the majlis and I had a flat tire. Instead of saying, okay, call AAA, bye, you say, no, wait, I'm gonna help you out. Here's the thing, let's lift your car, let's put the tire on. You solve my problem. That's compassion. When you help me. Instead of just saying, you know what, call AAA, they're gonna help you out. I'll see you tomorrow. When you help somebody out, when you solve their problem, that's compassion. So now we're gonna talk about, basically how Imam Hussain and his compassion. So a compassionate human being is one who is considerate, kind, empathetic, and loving. An individual who is truly cares for others, irrespective of who they are. It doesn't matter whether they're rich or they're poor, they're not from your country, they are from your country, they are your religion, they are not your religion. It doesn't matter. A compassionate person does not care who they're dealing with. They care for everybody. It could be they're Christian, they're Jewish. Right now we have a big problem with the Jewish, right? Because of what's happening in Gaza. But there's some Jewish that are good. So you have to help them. So a compassionate person does not differentiate between anybody. It's human being and they help them, that's it. So if you want to look at a man who is truly the symbol of love and compassion, then there's no other person than Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hussain was a man of humanity, an individual who would shed his tears for his enemy. So imagine that. Imagine a person who feels sorry for his enemy, right? How many of us can say that? I don't think anybody can say that. When you feel sorry for somebody who's about to kill you, you're feeling sorry for that person. That's Imam Hussain. Imagine that he kept trying again and again to his enemies on the day of Karbala. He's preaching to them. He's asking them to come back to the right path. He keeps talking to them again and again. He's lecturing them. He's feeling sorry for them. They're killing him. He's feeling sorry for them. This is true compassion. And he's trying to help them. A man who would serve the people in any way he could and make sure that their needs are taken care of. That's Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain looked at the people with such kindness and warmth that they knew that they would get help from him. So where did Imam Hussain learn this compassion from? Let's go back to his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His grandfather is Rahmatullah, the mercy to all of creation. Rahmatul lil Alameen. Mercy to all of creation. So that's his grandfather. So does he get his compassion from there? Yes, for sure. His father, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. His father is Karam Allah, the generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So does he get his compassion from his father? For sure he does. His mother, Sayyideh Fatamatul Zahra, Sayyidatul Nisa al-Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. She is Al-Kawsar. As the younger people should know that the surah, Inna Atayna Al-Kawsar. The Kawsar, which is the flourishing river of paradise, giving life to everything it touches. That's Fatamatul Zahra, his mother. So then, of course, we can say that it is no wonder that his father is Rahmatul Lillahi Alameen. His father is Karam Allah. His mother is Al-Kawsar. And so what is Imam Hussain? He becomes Safinatun Najat, the ship of salvation. What does this mean? The ship of salvation. Safinatun Najat. It means the ship that will save you from all the troubles that you could ever have. No matter what trouble you have, as long as you turn towards Imam Hussain, he will solve your problems for sure, no doubt. And again, we have to turn to the examples that are in the Quran, right? We find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to be compassionate in the Quran. In the Surah of Al-Isra, verse 23, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him and do good to your parents. If any of them or both of them reach an old age, do not say even the word uff to them, and do not scold them, and address them only with respect." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us compassion through this verse in the Quran, that be compassionate to your parents. Do not scold them in any way when they reach old age. And it's not just for the old age, it's for the kids too, when they get mad when their phones get taken away. You're not supposed to get mad at your parents. This is a direct order of Allah in the Quran. And then there's another verse in the Quran that talks about compassion. This is the verse 70 in chapter 76, verse 8 and 9, where it says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And they offered food to the needy, the orphan and the captive. We feed you for the sake of Allah alone. We wish for neither reward nor gratitude from you." And you guys know this verse from the Quran, that it is the house of Fatamatul Zahra. That, and I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but just for the kids, that, they were hungry, they were fasting. Imam Ali, Fatamatul Zahra, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain, they were all fasting. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And then one day, they're about to open the fast, and a needy person comes, and they give away their food. They keep fasting. The next day, they're about to open their fast, another person comes, and they give away their food. And then on the third day, they're fasting, and they're about to open their fast, and another captive comes and asks that he needs help. And they give away their food for the third day while they were fasting. So again, this shows an example of compassion. They did not care that they were hungry themselves, but they fed the needy on the 3 different occasions. So this is the examples of compassion in the Quran that it teaches us. And of course we know that the family of the Prophet Ahlul Bayt, they are the walking Quran. They are the exemplars of the Quran. So for sure they are practicing exactly what the Quran is saying. And that's where the compassion of Imam Hussain also comes from. Now if we go into the examples of compassion for Imam Hussain, we can see the first example when he is young. And Imam Hassan and Hussain are in the masjid. And they see an old man, he's making wudu. And they see that this old man is making the wudu totally wrong. So what do? They do not tell this man, oh, don't you know how to make wudu? If I'm making wudu wrong, for example, and Nakash tells me, you're giving speeches but you do not know how to make wudu, it will hurt my feeling, right? The same way Imam Hassan and Hussain are considerate for this old man, and they tell him, oh person, oh buzurg, oh friend, let us ask you to see us how we make wudu and tell us if we're making any mistakes. Oh uncle, let me say it this way, for example. And then they start to make wudu and ask him to find out their mistakes. And in doing so, the old man realizes his own mistake. So they were considerate and compassionate towards him. And he realizes his mistake without being hurt. This is compassion. This is so example of compassion when Imam Hussain is still young. Then there are so many other examples. The example of on the 10th of Muharram, of course. The example of Hur. We have the example of, and all of you know the example of Hur. But what is the compassion here? The compassion, of course, Hur is somebody, Hazrat Hur, before he goes and holds the horse of Imam Hussain and stops him and prevents him from going on his way to Kufa. And there's a exchange of words between Imam Hussain and Hur, which are very intense conversation. But Hur realizes his mistake. On the day of Ashura, Hur realizes his mistake. And he basically, he realizes that I'm standing on one side is heaven and on the other side is hell. And he chooses the right path. He's sorry for what he did. And he approaches Imam Hussain. And when he approaches Imam Hussain, he ties his eyes and he ties his hands. And Imam Hussain forgives him, even though he knows that this is the person that stopped us from going on our way. This is the person that, because of whom we do not have water and the kids are thirsty and there's no food or water in the camp. This is the person that led us to this situation. But what does Imam Hussain do? He forgives him. He welcomed him like a guest. He honors Hazrat Hur. And Hazrat Hur now becomes a hero of Karbala. So again, the concept of Safinatun Najat, right? How did Hazrat Hur become Hazrat Hur? He came from the enemy side, and he became the hero of Imam Hussain. Because, again, Imam Hussain rescued him, right? Imam Hussain with his compassion and his mercy, elevated the ranks of Hazrat Hur. The other example of the compassion of Imam Hussain is when in the day of Karbala, the young kids came to him and asked him if they can go into battle. Imam Hussain cared for these kids. He did not want them to go to the battlefield. I'm giving you the example of Qasim, little Qasim, son of Imam Hassan, right? You all know the story that little Qasim came to Imam Hussain and asked if he could go to the battlefield. And Imam Hussain looked at his nephew and said, "No, you cannot go to the battlefield. How can I let you go? You're a little kid." And he keeps going back and forth to his uncle, asking for permission. And Imam Hussain keeps telling him, "No, you cannot go to the battlefield." Until finally, little Qasim gets the help of his mother. And she gives him a letter. And then finally, Imam Hussain cannot refuse the request of his brother, Imam Hassan, which is written in that letter. And the same goes for the other kids. Oni Muhammad, right? The sons of Bibi Zainab. They also come and ask their uncle if they can go to the battlefield. But Imam Hussain feels sorry for them. Imam Hussain feels compassionate towards them. How can these young kids go to the battlefield? And he tells them, "No, you cannot go." He doesn't have the, he cannot just let them go to the battlefield. How? How can anybody let those kids go to the battlefield? Until his sister, Lady Zainab, Salamullahi alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. She makes a special request to her brother, and then he allows them to go forward. And then we have another example. There's so many examples. I did 5, so I'm on number 4 already. There's an example of Janabi John. As you guys know, that John was the slave of Imam Hussain. He was sent as a gift, he was given as a gift from Hazrat Abu Dhar al-Ghafari to the household of Hazrat Ali and Bibi Fatima. In the company of Hazrat Ali, John learned the tafsir of the Quran and the traditions of the Holy Prophet. He also knew the whole Quran by heart. When Hazrat Ali was martyred, John stayed with Imam Hassan. And then when Imam Hassan was killed, he stayed with Imam Hussain. So Janabi John was with all the 3 Imams. When Imam Hussain left Medina, Hazrat John insisted on joining him. On the night before Ashura, Hazrat John spent the whole night sharpening his words and his sword and praying and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the day of Ashur, Imam Hussain and his brother Abbas, Hazrat Abbas and his son Ali Akbar keep going back and forth to the battlefield and bringing back the bodies from the battlefield. And Hazrat John is looking at this scene. And finally, he cannot hold it anymore. And Hazrat John asks Imam Hussain. Silently, he stood there and asked Imam Hussain. And Imam Hussain looks at him and says, "What is wrong, John? You look so worried, like on your face there's some problem. What is the matter?" And then he says, "My master, enough is enough." This is Hazrat John speaking. "I cannot bear to see any more suffering. I cannot bear to see any of more children of Bibi Fatima killed in front of me. Please, my master, allow me to go to the battlefield." And Imam Hussain said, "John, you are an old man." Now, of course, John is old because he was from Imam Ali, then Imam Hassan, then Imam Hussain. So he's old in age. He said, "You are an old man. This jihad is not wajib on you. You are excused. You do not have to go." But John was determined to get permission. He asked, "Oh, my master, I know why you are not letting me go to the battlefield. It is because I'm a slave, and you do not want my blood to mix with the blood of the Holy Family." And Imam Hussain looks at him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And Imam Hussain tells him that, John, you know that we do not make these differences. We do not care for these things. And then he wishes John well and says, "May Allah help you." And he dresses John for the battlefield and mounts him on the horse and tells him to go on his way. This is the compassionate of Imam Hussain. And the last example is of the compassion of Imam Hussain. And this goes back now, that even before Karbala, in the battle of Nahrawan, the soldiers who were caught by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib were standing there, and one of the soldiers that was caught by Imam Ali on that day had ropes around his hands. And Imam Hussain was walking past him, and he saw this soldier. And the soldier looked at him and he said, "Oh Hussain, I beg you, please remove these ropes from my hand, because these ropes are causing me pain. Remove it, please, I'm asking you." So Imam Hussain went back to his father, Imam Ali, and he said, "Oh my father, I would like to ask you for a favor." He said, Imam Ali said, "What is it?" He said, "This person over there, he is asking me to remove the ropes. He says to me the rope is tight around his hand, even though we do not tighten the ropes. But it seems that it is hurting him, and he's asking me to remove them. Oh my father, do you allow me to do this?" Imam Ali looked at him and says, "Oh Aba Abdullah, go ahead. But let me ask you, why do you want to help him?" So Imam Hussain replies, "Father," Imam Ali's father, "when someone asks me for help, how can I refuse? I do not want this person to be sad that his request was not answered." And he went back to the person and he said, "Give me your hands." And then he removed the ropes from the hands of Shimr. He was removing the ropes from the person who would kill him. He was removing and relieving the pain of Shimr, the person who would strike his neck and end his life. This is the compassion of Imam Hussain. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to